Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Ralph Moore, here with Layo and Bushwacka today. This is a follow-up to yesterday's panel with Sasha, which was, of course, on the Burn IMS Anthem 2011. Yesterday, we unveiled this year's anthem, and today, we're going to talk about the unique way in which Layo and Bushwacka have remixed the track. The very first thing I think we should actually point out is that you remixed the track with the parts, having not heard the original. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, we did. It won't be the first time that we've done something like that. And often someone sends us an original track, and we then decide whether it's suitable for us to remix or not, and then we get them to send the parts. This time, Sasha's just sent the parts and no track, but what he sent us was actually really good stuff, so it was really a pleasure to work with.
We actually all made the same connection backstage there, which is, it sounds like a really great record, the vocal by The Police or Sting. It's sort of in spirit anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes not hearing the track actually can be a benefit, because you sort of feel a bit constricted about how you've got to remix the track, because it's got to stay true to the original, which obviously is important with a remix, but sometimes it can make you reject something just because you're not feeling the original. But in a funny way with this, under the sort of auspices of it, there had to be an anthem. It was lucky the vocal's really good. The vocal works really well, which makes life a lot easier. And we were able, which we'll talk through, to use quite a lot of Sasha's parts in order sort of to bring it together, to get a feel for what he did, but obviously much more in our style.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think I pointed out, having listened to it, is that it feels, sometimes a remix is obviously say it's a mix of a track, whereas I feel like what you've done is you've taken it somewhere where it completely exists as its own entity.
Yeah, I mean, what we've done this time, because the vocal was really strong and very original, really good, we've kept his track the same. We've kept our remix at the same tempo, but we've kept it very simple. But from just listening to the parts, just listening to the vocal, it was quite easy to actually imagine our own lines inside on top of his vocal that he's already done, and sort of quite strong hook lines. So we haven't tried to be too clever and chop things up too much with this. We've tried to keep it in the sort of vein of the fact that the project's an IMS anthem. Tried to keep it quite simple. And I mean, for me personally, as a DJ, a producer, all the best kind of house tracks, or the things that I play the most, are really the most simple tracks.
I think one of the things that people who are fascinated by dance music always want to know is how the record was actually created, whether whether in a studio or on the road, whether you were both there at the same time. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit how?
Well, we were always both there. Very occasionally, it kind of, for one reason or another, there may be an hour or two difference, but we're always both there. We don't really work on the road in terms of the studio. I mean, we've got a great studio around the corner from where Matt lives, and everything is done in there. It's kind of our home. I think I mean, obviously plenty of people work on the road. I was talking with someone, a friend of mine yesterday who works with David Guetta, and he says that even when he's on tour, he's like making records all day long. I guess we could work a bit harder and do that, but we tend to just work in the studio, together. And it very much, it depends in the way we work, very much depends on a remix, obviously, or if it's an original track. But the starting point is always generally rhythm-based.
And yourself, what particularly? There's a very distinctive organ sound in this track. Who came up with that? And
the hook line for that organ sound, as soon as I listened to the vocal, the first thing we did after deciding which of Sasha's drums to use was I wrote a bass line and then slightly processed it so that it's going to be a lot more audible on smaller systems, because it's a vocal track, because it's not something we can imagine is only going to get played on huge club systems. And the hook line was just in my head straight away, the organ type sound. We actually went and looked for that after writing the line on another synth, and it worked really well with the first half of Sasha's kind of string harmonies. It was slightly odd on the second half, so we kind of changed a couple of notes of the organ hook for the second half, and then tried playing with just one section of it or the other section, ended up putting both together and using that. Based again, the fact is classic house thing, IMS Anthem based. Yeah, it's a very classic house sound. It kind of doesn't get used that often, always works, I hope.
Layo, we were talking a little bit about where house music is at the moment in Ibiza, and I think we've both sort of come to the conclusion that it's in a very healthy place at the moment, just because people are taking elements of things from the past, and you know, definitely house music's got that swing again. And do you want to throw in?
Yeah, I mean, I you know, being a DJ producer for a long time, it's always quite interesting when sometimes you're very much involved in whatever the trend is, particularly on, you know, your career arc on the way up, and then other times you're obviously making music that's part of what other people are leading the trend. And you know, a few years ago it was obviously very dominated on the more cutting edge circuit by Minimal, and then through Luciano and Ricardo it probably led the way a little bit more to becoming a little bit more tribal and Latin in feel. And then I think what's happened recently, really interesting, and you had earlier this week Damien here and Jamie, Seth was ill, but what I guess led by the way Crosstown Rebels, you would say, and Hot Natured and labels like that, they've taken some of the elements of Minimal in terms of things being very stripped back, but obviously brought in house again, and it's given it kind of a groove and a bounce. But one of the things that's in fashion, which sounds really good, is keeping the drums stripped back a little bit, so music isn't kind of completely dominated just by rhythm. There's kind of a feeling of the bass lines and the melodies, but it's not overcomplicated, and vocals are definitely coming back, and have been back for a little while, and I think that makes universally, I think it helps a lot with house music, because I think it gives it a much broader appeal. You know, everything has its place and its time. You know, there are things about Minimal that were fantastic, but takes music into one direction. When you kind of bring other elements in, and that's what's really good about electronic music, it's constantly evolving. It really, you look at it for a 6-month period and there's a sound and a vibe, and then someone makes a new tune and suddenly a lot of people realize there's a whole new element of music coming in, and it gives a whole new inspiration, and loads of people then, you know, they use words like jump on the bandwagon. I don't think that's correct. It's just, it's what inspires a lot of people, and then it moves forward again. I think at the minute it's in a really, really good place.
I would say that's a perfect moment to play the record.
You want us to kick this off now? Yeah?
Well done, guys. I think everyone's in agreement. You've made a banger. Any questions from the floor?
I'm not sure if I'm still hammered from last night, but that's a really good track. Really good.
Thanks.
And completely different from what Sasha did yesterday. Actually, completely different. But so how many hours did that take? We actually sat down doing it for?
Well, 10 studio hours, but we probably spent 3 of those talking about other things while we were doing it. So
We generally do that.
we've still got to mix the track and possibly work with the vocals a little bit more for the last section. But yeah, about 8 or 10 hours so far.
Yeah, but really good. Well done.
Thanks.
Just wondering about some of the production that was done for this track. Did you do everything like using plugins in Logic or using hardware as well?
On the basis that we knew that we were going to be presenting this here, we did everything pretty much using Logic plugins. Yeah, everything's in-house, which was actually quite nice for us to sit back and see. Because I mean, I spend a lot of time investigating new plugins, what's going on, learning new bits of software, getting very excited about whatever's just coming out. But when it comes down to it, what you get with just Logic in the package is more than adequate for actually making a fantastic track.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Gentleman in the front.
Yeah, it sounds great. Was the piano played live? And number 2, why does it always stick to one tonality? Why is it so that all these interesting harmonies are deleted sort of in this type of style?
Well, I mean, DJ music, when you're DJing, you tend to find, like if we write album music, we can write with more complication to it because we're sort of aiming much more for listening. But when music's played out in a club, I mean, one of the things that we do, like for example with this, and we would do much more if it wasn't in such a 10-hour window, we would do the mix, we would DJ it out, maybe 2 or 3 different places, hear it on different sounds at home, the car, all the different things to get a feeling, to see how the balances sound, the vocals, where everything sits. But if you have loads and loads of changes and loads of harmonies and loads of things going on, whilst to listen to it's really good, in terms of when you hear it alongside 6 or 7 other tunes, it can it loses something and it can be a bit over complex. And the truth is, with a lot of good dance music, as Matthew said, it is actually quite simple. It's of a moment and a feeling, and when it's hugely amplified, that works. And things that tend to have loads and loads of lines, and we've made that mistake before, somehow it loses its power when you compare it to other tracks being played.
And there's something else as well. I mean, on the basis that we felt that the vocal was really strong on this track, and we've used the full vocal. Actually, when Sasha sent us the parts, he sent us a dry vocal, which means a vocal that hasn't been affected. Then he sent us a vocal that's been harmonised, that's been doubled up with the singer that he's processed quite a lot. So subliminally underneath the simple hook line that we've written with the organ, which produces its own harmonics, although that line is staying the same, what's happening underneath the vocals, underneath it is creating a lot of harmonies which cut through, but they don't overtake the track. So that's probably the reason why as well we didn't go too crazy with the changes.
Thank you.
Hello, are you guys playing these days around in Ibiza to prove it, the track, on the audience?
No, I think, I think I've done a panel, we do this. I think if they see too much of us at IMS, people get a bit sick, so it's just this, I think.
Did you write this to particularly fit in how your sets are currently going at the moment, or just basically feeling the vibe off the Sasha original?
Yeah, I think that when we heard the parts he sent us, and we decided, because one of the things that we did with the vocals was we thought we'd maybe go for something a little bit more chopped up, pre-using his full verses and choruses. And we tried that. We tried various things, but we felt like we were complicating, trying to be clever for the sake of being clever rather than keep the purity of the track. Arrangement-wise, yeah, and especially because us and for ourselves as DJs. A lot of other DJs DJ with tracks and out, or with CDJs with looping facilities. We've kept it in a format that we would easily play it from start to finish, but then there are sections like at the beginning and after the vocal that we would happily loop up while we're mixing other tracks on top. Yeah.
I think for just to add comment, like it's a pretty cool track, and considering you've mixed it in a day, it all sounds really balanced, which I know can be quite hard with your fatigue, like for sure.
Yeah,
So well done, definitely.
Thanks. I think that's part of keeping it simple as well. I think the more complicated we made it, the balances would get more and more complex.
Any last questions?
Yeah, I have another question
Oh,
actually.
sorry.
Do you have like a favorite plugin that you used for this track that helps you to get some of your signature sounds? Something that you use for some sound design or?
On this track, no, although the one thing that it is going through, which isn't Logic, is made by a company called Isotope, and it's a mastering plugin called Ozone 4, which on the basis that when we write a track, we spend X amount of hours, days writing and arranging it. When it comes to actually mixing and mastering it, I'll spend a lot more time in the studio tweaking each individual sound. Everything's running through Ozone on this, so that when you're hearing it now, you're hearing like a much more balanced mix in general. So, as I said, the actual mixing of the track itself isn't finished, but it's going through an equalizer, it's going through a loudness maximizer, harmonic enhancer, and some compression. So that's what's keeping the sound quite fat. Yeah.
So you're actually mastering the tracks yourself then after they're done?
It will go and get mastered, but the way it works these days with the technology and if you've got a good place with good speakers, you can kind of get it to as high a standard as you possibly can yourself before you pass it on to someone else. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's all the questions. Well, thank you very much, Layo and Bushwacka,
Thank
ladies and gentlemen.